You're listening to the Harmony of We, a space for remembering what we already are together. I'm Greg Kuiper, counselor, author, and fellow traveler in this ongoing field of being human. This podcast isn't about fixing. It's not about getting relationships right. It's about coming into resonance with yourself, with each other, and with the presence that lives in between. This is where the book Relationship, the Harmony of We continues in breath, in story, and in shared awareness. Welcome. Thanks for joining us here today on another episode of The Harmony of We. Over the past several episodes, we've been following our couple, Ethan and Maya, through the ordinary moments that quietly shape a relationship. We've watched them miss each other. We've watched them begin to repair, and we've explored why repair can feel difficult, why sometimes it doesn't immediately bring us back together. We've watched them learn to stay, even when uncertainty remained. And last week, we looked at something many of us know well, the stories our mind create when information is incomplete, the meanings we assign, the conclusions we reach before we've truly understood what the other person is experiencing. Today, I'd like to stay with that moment just a little bit longer. Because once we recognize we're living inside a story, a new question becomes possible. We don't ask, am I right? But would you help me understand? Curiosity is one of the quietest expressions of love, right? We don't usually think of it that way. We tend to think of love as affection, commitment, sacrifice, support. All of those matter. But curiosity says something just as meaningful. It says, I don't want to assume I know your experience, or I care enough to ask. I want to understand your world, even if it isn't the same as mine. And perhaps that's one of the greatest gifts we can offer another person, understanding, not just blind agreement. One of the most difficult habits for us to notice in ourselves is how quickly certainty arrives. We often become certain about what another person meant before we become curious about what they were actually experiencing. The mind likes certainty. The heart grows through curiosity. Let's check in with our couple. It's a Saturday afternoon, the first truly warm weekend of spring. Ethan and Maya have decided to spend the afternoon walking through the local farmers market. Months ago, an afternoon like this might have felt strangely disconnected. They would have walked beside each other, talked about groceries, commented on the weather, moved through the day together without really being together. Today feels different for them. It's not something they can really name. The difference isn't dramatic. It's just softer, more relaxed. There's still unfinished work between them. There's still some old habits that occasionally appear, but there is also something new. There is an awareness, a willingness to notice. They wander slowly past fresh flowers, handmade pottery, and tables overflowing with vegetables. There's a musician playing acoustic guitar near the center of the market. Children are laughing somewhere behind them. People stop to greet neighbors. Life unfolds around them in ordinary, beautiful ways. Maya pauses at a booth selling handmade journals. She picks one up, runs her fingers across the cover, and smiles quietly. Ethan notices. Thinking about getting one? She nods. I've been thinking about writing more. He smiles. I think you'd like that. She looks up at him. There's a warmth there. It's a small moment, simple, uncomplicated. As they continue walking, they pass a booth selling locally roasted coffee. The owner greets Ethan enthusiastically. Good to see you again. They begin talking. Only for a few minutes, but the conversation stretches longer than either expected. The owner introduces Ethan to another customer. The conversation expands. Maya steps back, waiting. At first, she simply watches. Then she notices herself becoming quiet. A familiar feeling begins stirring, not strong, just recognizable. The old story whispers, here we go again. He's forgotten I'm standing here. Months ago, that story would have continued growing. Without question, without interruption, it would have become reality for her. But today, something different happens. She notices the story before she believes it. This is a remarkable moment, not because the story disappeared, because it didn't. It still ended, just as quickly as always, but awareness arrived too. She takes a slow breath, and instead of feeding the story, she simply observes it. She thinks, interesting. I'm beginning to tell myself something. The conversation at the coffee booth ends. Ethan walks back toward her, smiling. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that conversation kept going. She smiles back at him. It's okay. Then she pauses. She's not uncomfortable. She's deciding. Do I tell him? Or do I let the story continue silently inside me? Months ago, she probably wouldn't have said anything. She would have smiled. They would have gone home. She would have become quieter during the evening. And Ethan would have sensed distance without understanding where it began. Today, she chooses something different. Can I tell you something? His attention settles completely onto her. Of course. When you were talking over there, she smiles gently, I noticed myself starting to create a story. He waits. No interruption, no explanation. I started telling myself that you'd forgotten I was standing there. The words hang softly between them, not dramatic, nothing accusing, just simply honesty. Ethan feels something move inside him immediately, not guilt or defensiveness, but gratitude, because she's letting him see something happening inside her before it becomes distance between them. He reaches gently for her hand. I can understand why that story showed up. He pauses. I honestly thought we were both just enjoying being there. Maya nods slowly. I know. Then she laughs quietly. The strange thing is, I knew there were probably other explanations, but my mind picked that one first. Ethan smiles. I think my mind does that too. They continue walking through the market, hand in hand now, not because everything has been solved, but because something was shared before it became separation. Neither of them had to defend, neither of them had to convince, neither had to be right. Curiosity entered before certainty hardened. One of the greatest transformations in a relationship isn't learning to communicate better. It's learning to become curious sooner. Before assumptions become beliefs, before beliefs become reactions, before reactions become patterns. Curiosity interrupts certainty, and certainty, left unquestioned, often becomes distance. Imagine how many conversations never happen because we become convinced we already know. Imagine how many opportunities for connection quietly disappear because interpretation arrives before inquiry. When we ask instead of assume, we create room for another reality to emerge. Sometimes that reality confirms what we sensed. Sometimes it surprises us completely. Either way, we are now relating to the person, not our interpretation of them. You've probably experienced this yourself. Maybe you noticed someone's tone change or you felt them pull away. You interpreted their silence, and before you realized it, your own behavior began responding to a story that had never been spoken aloud. We've all done this because our minds are meaning making instruments. They are constantly trying to create coherence from incomplete information. The goal isn't to stop that process, it's to notice it early enough that curiosity still has room to enter. Sometimes one gentle question changes the direction of an entire relationship. Like, you seem quieter today. Is something happening? Can I check something with you? Or I noticed a story forming in my mind and I'd rather ask than assume. Those aren't just communication skills, they're invitations into trust. As they leave the market, Ethan glances over and smiles. I'm kind of proud of us. Maya laughs. We're becoming slightly less weird. He laughs too. I don't know about that. They both smile. And there's something wonderfully ordinary about the moment. No big breakthrough, no emotional climax. Just two people becoming a little more honest, a little more curious, a little more willing to let each other into the conversations happening inside their own minds. And perhaps that's what growth often looks like. Not dramatic change, but quieter misunderstandings, shorter distances, gentler returns. Curiosity is an act of humility. It quietly admits, I may not be seeing this clearly. There's something profoundly connecting about that because it leaves room for another person's experience to exist alongside our own experience. Presence isn't simply paying attention to another person, it's being willing to let them surprise us, to discover that their inner world is often richer and more understandable than the story we created in its place. So perhaps this week, notice the next story that begins forming in your mind, not to judge it or silence it, but simply to recognize it. And before you decide it's true, pause. Take one more breath. Then ask yourself, what might I not know yet? Or perhaps ask the other person. Because sometimes one sincere question asked with genuine curiosity creates more connection than 100 carefully chosen answers. Relationships don't become stronger because we stop misunderstanding one another. They become stronger because we become less afraid of asking, less certain, more curious, more willing to let another human being tell us who they are instead of deciding for them. And every time we do, the harmony of we becomes just a little easier to hear. The healing begins in the space between us. May you walk in the harmony of we.